Got to get some WD-40 for that door, huh? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm told that the other committee members are on their way. And Ms. Skinner, who is the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee, is joining us today. Welcome, Ms. Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Daly.
We'll wait a couple more minutes until we have at least one additional member. And here come two. Welcome, Mr. Morrell and Mr. Mullen. So now that we have a quorum, good afternoon to everyone. I'll welcome you to the Budget Sub 4 Committee hearing. Today we're focused on the budgets of the Department of Industrial Relations and the Department of Veterans Affairs. The issue number 4 will be a vote-only item with no presentation, and we'll handle that item when we arrive there. We're taking the Department of Industrial Relations first. We'll follow the agenda in order here. And I'll ask the staff of the Department of Industrial Relations. Welcome, Mr. Wagner. I'll ask the staff of the Department of Industrial Relations to present the first item, which is Process Safety Management Unit expansion. This is an item that we dealt with extensively last year, and before we ask the staff to speak, now that we have a quorum, I'll ask a Christian to call the roll.
Daly.
Here.
Morrell.
Here.
Mullen. Present. Nazarian. Wagner.
Here.
All right. Yeah, go ahead, please, with the first item.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. The staffing of our Process Safety Management Unit is extremely important to us. DIR has been on a very aggressive effort to staff, train, enter into regulatory modernization, upgrade our regs, and have a policy of collaboration among other agencies. We also are very much into outreach and collaboration with the stakeholders. So we are grateful for the opportunity to amend our budget.
All right. I think this is as good a time as any to invite questions. And Ms. Skinner, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining our hearing. I have some questions about our budget action of last year. So last year, we took two separate and distinct actions. We approved a movement of 4 existing positions within your department to the Process Safety Management Unit, and then we approved a trailer bill language or an action that gave statutory authority to implement. I mean, you already had the authority, but basically directed your use of existing statutory authority to implement a fee that would support at least 15 new staff to perform process management PSM activities through the state. And that came about as a result of, obviously, partly the Chevron incident, but also the Chemical Safety Board's own assessment of that that we would be greatly improved by having additional staff to inspect the over 140 very complex facilities like refinery and chemical and other facilities in the state, and that we needed additional inspectors. And so our initial action, the Chemical Safety Board's recommendation for the number of inspectors we might use was actually quite higher. But the budget action that we took was the 15 new and the 14 from internal to the department. So as I view that, that would be a minimum of 19 new positions, at least 15 of whom would be inspectors. So I wanted to, when I review the materials that we have, it would seem to indicate that we have not done 19, only a total of 15, and that within that 15, 4 are the movement from other parts of your department, which is fine, but they're not all inspector. They're also for admin. And so while I don't question the need for administrative positions, what my real concern is how we're going to achieve the minimum of 15 full-time inspectors with a certain training level.
Thank you for your question. We do believe that using technology and modernization and moving through our regs, we are well staffed at this point. We would like to come back, if necessary, once we get all of our regulations upgraded and our enforcement teams trained and the technological modernization that we're undergoing across all of Kenosha. We'd like to come back and perhaps advise for additional staff that might be needed.
And that would be a great discussion to have, the additional staff. But my question right now is that it doesn't appear that we have the 15 inspectors. It would appear that we have 15 positions, but 4 of which are being dedicated to admin. So is it, given that our actions were 2 distinct actions, 4 plus 15, which is 19, I'm wondering your plans to get us the 15 full inspectors.
We will have overall 19 inspectors in the PSM unit.
By?
August 14th. We have a process of hiring and replacing other staff. We're taking the top-notch Kenosha co-shows will be transferred in, and those will be backfilled. So we're getting 6 that will be transferring in. We're hiring another 6 from outside from our lists of very highly qualified co-shows. So we'll have overall approximately 19 inspectors. 5 will be up north, 5 will be down south for just refinery evaluation. Another 2 up north and 2 down south will be dedicated to complaints, accidents, and anything kind of that would come up from the unknown. And the additional 5 are going to be dedicated to the non-refinery position, non-refinery work. Mm-hmm. So overall, we will have 19 positions fully dedicated to inspecting refineries and the non-PSM. Excuse me, non-refinery.
Right. Those are my questions.
All right. Thank you for the questions and the answers. Are there other questions on this first issue? Ms. Skinner, is it your feeling that this should be held over? Would you prefer that, or are you satisfied with the answers?
Let me look real quick at the action.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. And while Ms. Skinner takes a look at the item, might we hear from LAO and anybody else who might have some thoughts on that particular question?
Sure, excellent. Finance, any comments or analysis from Finance?
Natalie Daniel, Department of Finance. This proposal would increase the existing PSM unit from 11 staff to 26. As the department indicated, we would be putting considerable resources toward inspector positions. Actually, when fully staffed up, this would have 20 inspector positions and two positions that would be management type positions that would also be engineering background, so that would have 22 of the 26 positions in the PSM unit being engineers. Additionally, DIR has conducted an average of 6 planned inspections per year, and these averaged about 64 hours per inspection. Under this proposal, DIR would be able to conduct approximately 83 planned inspections a year, and many of these inspections would be 1,200 and 1,500 hours each, which would be more in line with what the federal standards are. So total planned inspection hours would go from an average of 373 hours to more than 23,000.
Are there questions on the Finance Department analysis?
I have some, but maybe we hear if LAO wants to add anything first, and then I'll ask.
Go ahead, LAO.
Thank you. Jenny Bella with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We've reviewed the proposal. The workload appears justified for this level of positions, and we don't have any concerns to raise at this time.
So the question I'd ask, but Mr. Wagner, you may have one, is that when I look at this language, it says, a proposal to expand the PSM staffing by 15, 11 new positions, and then 4. So that description is an action that he's proposing and we would take this year. The confusing part to me is that it lists as existing staff 11, proposed new 11, redirected 4. And we took a budgetary action last year that already authorized 15 new and redirected 4, which would put it at 20, or 19, excuse me. If we were going to add additional 11, that would be 30?
30.
Yeah, versus 26. Now, I'm not here to try to figure out whether we need the 26 or the 30. It's just very confusing to see a chart that seems to indicate like we didn't act last year. I mean, if we're adding 11 new positions to the 15 plus 4 we already authorized, that's more than 26.
Yeah, and I would just note, Mark Tollefson, Department of Finance, part of this proposal is to add the 11 new. For the 4 that were redirected by the legislature last year, this is actually truing up the funding to allow for those classifications to be hired as engineers rather than the kind of administrative type staff that was redirected previously.
Good, but it would still, given if we took this action at its face value and the action we acted last year, it would still make you have higher than 26. So I just, again, some reconciliation, a good reason why to keep it open.
Right. I was going to suggest at least a week or two so that this can all be reconciled. It sounds like it's moving in the right direction. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Greg Edwards, the Department of Industrial Relations. Just a point of clarification. The action that was taken in the 2013 budget was to add provisional language to give the Department of Finance the authority to increase the staffing in the current year. The reason that the BCP
And it specified a number.
Yes, ma'am, it did, and I'll get to that in a moment. The reason why this BCP is crafted in the way it is that we thought, the department thought, and the administration concurred, we thought it needful, since the augmentation was in provisional language in the 2013 Budget Act, to memorialize that action, make it permanent into the 14-15 fiscal year and beyond. And so that is why this shows as a technical add to the 14-15 budget to provide that clarity that the action taken in the 2013 budget was intended to be permanent and not one time. And so that's why you see the 11 and the 4, total of 15.
Yes, but our action last year were 2 separate actions, 4 plus 15.
And I'm not disputing that. What the department did is do the best it could to do its due diligence, to look not only at the numbers specified, but the intent behind the numbers, the goal, and work within the parameters that the administration gave us to work.
Okay. I'm imagining that the Senate will have something to say about this too, only because we worked closely with our Senate counterparts in this particular, so
Right.
We may want to see how they weigh in and what type of questions they may ask before we finalize.
So the sentiment is to hold this over. Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one before we move on. Much of this is in response to the Richmond refinery fire. I'm just curious about DIR's process in determining which refineries and facilities will be inspected. Is that an automatic, recurring kind of a thing, or is it more selective based on information that you get? Can you just explain that?
It'll be a little bit of both. We will have a program to hit all of the refineries across the state. There are 14 refineries, so we expect all of them to be inspected. Of course, if there's an accident, incident, or complaint, we will send our teams out over and above that planned inspection.
And each, if I may add to that, sir, each year, as plants are closed for maintenance, I believe the technical term for that is turnaround, there will be 4 turnaround inspections each year that are deeper and more wall-to-wall, in addition to having an inspector at each refinery.
And that more in-depth action, how many inspectors are involved in something which you're describing?
Approximately 4. And we are also revising our regulations, which will also help and assist our teams in digging deeper into the issues within the refineries to ensure increased safety.
Thank you.
Mr. Daly.
Yes, question.
Mr. Mullen, I appreciate those questions, and I just kind of wanted to add to it in that the Chemical Safety Board reviewed both the level of staffing we had and the amount of hours our average inspection was at our refineries and at our other large complex chemical facilities. And it was their recommendation that we needed both in additional people, enhanced training, and many more hours in terms of the inspection per facility. And clearly, in the language, in the document that we have before us, there is anticipation by the department to greatly increase the number of hours of inspection per facility. And the purpose of my questions were more, are we, given that this is in more conformance with the Chemical Safety Board recommended, and quite a lot more hours, like up to 1,500 hours per facility, would we be able to achieve that, given that we had not yet moved to the full 19 positions?
I'm sorry, was that a question to the department? Just a point of clarification with respect to the 19 positions. I believe the director said that they would be filled by August. Just to clarify that statement, we expect that the PSM unit will be fully staffed by April. Since some of those staff are transferring from other units within DOSH, we expect the full backfill into those units to be completed by August. So the full staffing ramp up in the PSM unit will be achieved in April or before the end of April.
All right. We will hold this item over, and that'll give an opportunity to clarify some of these remaining points. Some was clarified today, but I think there's still a little bit more that's necessary. And also we'll give a chance for the Senate side to have their questions answered. Let's go ahead to issue number 2, which is an update on the occupational safety and health staffing. Please.
The Department of Industrial Relations DOSH program has had to hold open positions to fund. It's been underfunded in terms of being able to fully support the positions that we have already authorized. This proposal puts forth enough funding to allow us to fill all 26 positions that we have historically had to hold open to support our budget. We believe that this will greatly enhance our ability to increase our enforcement, to increase our compliance, and increase consultation.
Thank you. Comments from the Department of Finance or from the LAO?
We have no concerns with the proposal. In our view, it makes sense to use this freed up money to fund these vacant positions in OSH.
Good, thank you. Any questions by the committee members? If not, a motion to approve as budgeted would be appropriate. Oh, Mr. Wagner, sorry.
I need a clarification. It's my understanding there was a deal back in, I think, the 2009 budget year, and these were not to be made permanent, and now it looks like we're making them permanent. Do I have that deal correct? They were made permanent last year.
Yes.
Okay. But prior to that, there was a deal.
I think there was a cap on the funding and
Correct.
So.
And they weren't to be
last
permanent
year
as part of the deal.
Last year, it was the cap was adjusted and the sunset was eliminated.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, the department is doubling down this year on its violation of the 2009 deal before.
If I may.
Of course you may, unless he stops you.
I'm sorry. Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
sir. Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
sir. I believe you are referring to the sunset that was on the OSH fund, which was lifted last year. Just as a point of clarification, there were no additional positions associated with the fund shift from general fund to OSH fund support. That was just to support the existing program as it was. So I'm not sure that I understand the specifics of your question.
The specifics are, in 2009, there was a deal cut as part of the overall 2009 budget package back in the bad old pre-Prop 25 days, where there were to be caps, and these positions were not to be permanent. And the legislature, in its wisdom, after Prop 25 and deals no longer needed to be honored, reneged on that deal in I guess the last budget session, and we're simply just continuing that bad practice here, right?
To my recollection, there were no temporary positions associated with that funding shift.
If there are no further questions, a motion would be appropriate. Motion and second to approve the budget as proposed by the governor. Roll call vote, please.
Daley?
Aye.
Morrell? No. Mullen? Aye. Nazarian? Yes. Wagner?
All right. Brings us to issue number 3, which is Public Works Contracting Enforcement. This involves a proposed new fee. And if Ms. Baker, if you could summarize the proposal.
Sure, thank you very much. The Public Works, the Department of Industrial Relations has been working over several years to consolidate and bring efficiency to the entire Public Works program. This proposal will allow full funding of our program. It has been a patchwork of different sources, including fees, both from employers as well as fees from charged to the different awarding bodies. Thank you. That we've had to try to do a patchwork to support this effort. This proposal will consolidate all the funding into one fee overall to be paid for by contractors that intend to bid on Public Works.
We have, there's been quite a bit of discussion among the private sector contractors who will be paying the fee and the department, I understand. And a letter came in from the AGC, the Associated General Contractors, and they raised a number of points. To the extent, when do you think the department will be prepared to resolve one way or another, even if you disagree with some of those points? When do you think you'll be ready to respond? Well, first, has there been a response to that letter? It came in late February.
We've had ongoing dialogue with
Okay.
the AGC, and we believe that some of the issues, there's been some clarification. There's also been areas where we think regulations are in order to further clarify some of the issues raised. We are very open to working with the AGC and with labor to ensure that all these issues are met.
All right, and there will be an opportunity for public comments. Why don't we surface any questions by committee members first, if there are any questions? If not, any questions by committee members? Mr. Morrell.
Yeah, you know what I'm concerned about is if we have a contractor that's a good player and he's in good faith working through trying to do, go along according to your guidelines. Perhaps he has a subcontractor who's maybe has not paid us $300. How often would you, the concern that I have is, you would fine him, maybe you would suspend him for 2 years, which, could hurt a person's business versus perhaps giving them a period to correct the problem.
There is no authority here to fine or to suspend. So I think working through regulations to kind of define and further clarify how we should address the problem of the subcontractor that is not paying his dues is in order through the regulatory process.
And if I may amplify that, the dialogue that we are currently engaged in will help inform those draft regulations, which we believe will be ready to be sent as soon as the Budget Act is signed. So to your question, Mr. Chairman, we anticipate the normal public process, public notification, regulatory process that we would go through when implementing this type of change in law and/or future fees.
Now, you guys make the calls on. You make the calls on this, correct? Rather than it's not part of the law. In other words, you're making the decisions on who gets. Yeah, through the regulation.
Through the regulations.
Don't you think that'd be better to actually have that in statute?
I think the regulations actually allow for more feedback, more interaction by the parties.
And did you say, on your following up your point, Mr. Morrell, there would be public hearings on the proposed regulations?
Correct.
And when would you estimate the first public hearing might be if this fee is in the budget and the budget is approved and signed? When would the first public hearing on the proposed regulations be, approximately?
If we expedite right now, start to work on our regulations based on conversations that we've been having with the parties, we anticipate that we can be ready to go public in July once the budget process has passed.
That means you'll have to have these public hearings on the proposed regulations
Correct.
between now and July, right?
I don't see a problem with
Right.
doing that.
Okay, but I just want to clarify it for everyone that there will be.
Unless we need the authority. I'd need to check with our
Would the hearings be
lawyers.
prior to budget adoption or after budget adoption?
Right.
Well, the intent of the statutory language, at least in part, is to accelerate or at least make sure that there was no barrier July 1 to receive the fee. With respect to the enforcement that would be associated with this change in law, that enforcement would not begin until the regulatory process had run its course.
But for instance, the draft regulations, when would affected parties first see the draft regulations that accompany this fee?
We think we could be ready by May or June.
Okay, that's what I was. And Mr. Morrell, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you're wondering what the process is going to be for the rules, guidelines that accompany this fee. Right, right. Okay, okay. And I think we're hearing there'll be draft regulations
We'll work with the party.
quite soon. Draft, and then there'll be required public hearings on
Correct.
that language.
Correct.
Is that?
Well, and when you say public hearings, are you referring to the normal hearings that take place during any regulatory process?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, where affected parties can speak
Yes,
and go on the record as to whether they agree or not.
Absolutely.
Other questions by committee members? If not, let's hear from Mr. Wagner.
Well, I do want to follow up on that regulatory versus statutory issue because I think it's important and I think it's something that gets way too short shrift here in the legislature. All right, you're going to draft regulations. You're going to go through the normal process. You're going to get public input because that's the way we do regulations here. But the fact is, I dispute the idea that you've got so much more flexibility because you've got regulations as opposed to statute. The bottom line is the regulations function as laws. We are the lawmaking body. We also go through a public process, and we hear from our constituents, and we sit up here and we do these hearings, and we can, if they're not working, we can change them because we're continually getting public feedback. You guys, and it's not just you, it's every department in this state, you don't have the same feedback mechanisms that we do, and you don't have the same incentives and encouragements from the public when regulatory frameworks are too restrictive or aren't working or are not responsive to the real public needs. So Mr. Morrell's question, I think, is a good one. What's wrong with putting it in statute and leaving the rules and the regulations and the responsibility with the electeds, and then if it doesn't work, we can fix it. If it doesn't work, you can come to us and tell us it doesn't work, it needs to be fixed. What assurances do I have that once you do the minimum that you have to the first time the regulations are promulgated, you're good to go forever and that you're going to be responsive to my constituents? It's not you guys alone, it's you and everybody else. I don't see that. So I think Mr. Morrell's question deserves, a little bit more of an answer. Why is this the right way to go rather than letting us, as the legislature, do our job?
I appreciate that question. I guess the only assurance that we could provide you is our past practice and our history. We serve not just the workers of California, but the law-abiding employers as well. And so I don't have another answer to your question, and I appreciate it, and I understand what you're saying. But I think you need to look at our record, and that record either assures you or it does not.
So,
Mr. Morrell.
most of the government agencies that I do see, based on the past track record, they get carried away, and that's probably why we have so many businesses leaving California. We just regulate, we overfee, we overcharge, and we're losing things every single day because of this too much government authority to one department. It doesn't seem like it represents the interest of our business or our citizens. That's what the legislative body is for, is to legislate. Thank you.
All right. Are there other questions? If not, we'll invite any public comments on this budget proposal, which again is for a new fee on contractors. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave Ackerman. I represent the Associated General Contractors who've been referenced as sending a letter. And this wasn't just on behalf of AGC, but it was on behalf of, there are 5 different construction associations that I do give the director a lot of credit. She reached out to us when the budget was introduced and indicated that this fee was going to be part of it and wanted to discuss with us the parameters of that. At the time of that discussion, I'm a little confused by the discussion that's gone on here, because we were told that statute was going to be necessary in order to implement the fee and establish the parameters. Regulations may be required to actually implement that statute, but you've got to have some statutory base on which to charge a new fee and the parameters. And then just after we had the meeting with the director, the Department of Finance posted on their website the trailer bill statutory language that would implement this. So whether that's still germane or not, I'm a little confused as to whether statute's still required, but we were asked by the director to recommend to look at the statute and recommend possible changes to that to make it work. We support the $300 fee. We support DIR having money from the industry to enforce prevailing wage and to enforce the state's labor laws. We think that's appropriate and that's okay. It just needs to be done right, and it needs to be done without any unintended consequences to it. And what we're concerned about, and I think there were a couple questions that referenced it, at least in the statute we saw, that if a contractor performs public work without being registered in the state, they're subject to a 2-year debarment from ever working on any other public works job in the state. Now, to me, I read that as a penalty, and something that at least the director indicated wasn't the intent, but we see that as problematic. We also see problematic as to who controls the fee. We think this committee should vote on setting the fee. You would approve the trailer bill language of a $300 fee, and that's the way it should be. If the director wishes to increase the fee in the future, come back to the committee, say what the fee's been spent on, whether it's adequate or inadequate, and then ask for permission legislatively again to change the fee. The trailer bill language that we've seen gives the director independent authority to adjust the fee as the director sees fit on an annual basis, and we don't think that was necessarily the intent. We think that authority should remain with the legislature. Another issue we have, I'm sorry to belabor the point, but this is important thing, Mr. Chairman. The way you bid is extremely complicated in California. There are other statutes under the Public Contract Code that control bidding in this state by public agencies. You have to list subcontractors on what's called the sublisting law. Usually bids are due at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday. That's typical for public agencies. It's absolute bedlam in a general contractor's office at 10 minutes to 2 on Thursday as bids are come flowing in from a variety of subcontractors. Now what we're going to have to be able to do, at least the way the trailer bill language says, we're going to have to check with DIR to make sure that any subcontractor bidding to us is registered and has paid their $300 fee to DIR before we are allowed to list them on our bid. Of course, under the Public Contract Code, we're forced to go to a low bid situation so that the price and who that contractor is on a sub is very important to us as to whether you win or lose the bid. So what we want to make sure, we support DIR charging a $300 fee for contractors to do public works. That should be the intent, not to deny someone their bid, determine their bid is unresponsive, or determine that their bid is going to get thrown out or subject to a bid protest because we either have put a contractor on the bid that may not be registered or the like. That's not the intent of this. The intent is to get contractors registered with DIR, pay a $300 fee to fund their enforcement activities, not provide a gotcha or a bid protest situation or the like. So those are the main things. There's other complexities that I won't get into because they even get more esoteric. But you've got to be very careful. I mean, I read the bills, I read the law, and I've read the language in the proposed trailer bill. And those are amendments that we've presented to the director's office. And what we respectfully request is the committee at least hold final decision on this item open so that Ms. Baker can meet with the industry, continued, work out the details for us so that we can support an enforcement budget that gives the director the resources she needs to do labor and prevailing wage enforcement without negative consequences on the contractor. So that's what we would ask of the committee.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We're still under public comments. Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Todd Blumstein for the Southern California Contractors Association. To reiterate what Mr. Ackerman said, SCCA, my client, supports the $300 fee. They also support the enforcement actions. Our contractors are 100% union contractors. They actually contribute to enforcement practices to eliminate the underground economy through private means. So we support the goal. The issue for us is twofold. The first is the unintended consequences that Mr. Ackerman spoke of. One of them happens to be disgorgement. There's a whole body of law that I know Mr. Wagner has worked on for a while dealing with disgorgement, where if a contractor is suddenly unlicensed by the licensing board, that contractor can no longer work and he's responsible. He actually loses the money that he worked on for that project. So we're very, very fearful of what will happen if this registration isn't paid, perhaps midstream during a project. I'll leave a final point that I think the committee should consider. DIR does a good job of enforcing, and they want to expand that enforcement, and we support that. There are 295,000 contractors in the state. I think it's a tall order to ask this department to administer a program for 290,000 contractors. I think the committee really should consider working with the licensing board, which is what the industry does. That's the interface between contractors, between the industry and the government. Why not authorize the licensing board to assess a fee and have those funds go to the Department of Industrial Relations for enforcement? So please, Mr. Chair, I think you should have a discussion and consider that under this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other public comments?